Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin was first elected to Congress in 2010. He was elected to his current post in 2014. He's launched his re-election bid already, too. You're already out there just right at the tail end of a campaign season. He now joins me in studio for conversation. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, here. Yes. I didn't even bring anybody else on. Just going to be all you talking all the time.
I've known you so long. We should tell them. We should disclose. We went to college together.
That's right.
We know secrets.
They're all buried.
Yes.
All right. So my adjective for describing what we just witnessed in 2016 in the presidential race, I've gone through improbable, unbelievable, far-fetched, and I'm going to settle on a new word. Untrumpable. It was an untrumpable election night. What was your reaction as you see the results coming in? I think everyone, and I think you would admit this, you knew it was a long shot.
Can't trump this.
Yeah.
I've heard that before.
Right.
Yeah, so my perspective going into election night was that he had, and I think it's fair to say, based on what I've read, based on whom I've talked to, that a lot of folks in the RNC and the Trump campaign sort of had some of these same thoughts. There had been a good 3 weeks or so for the campaign, focused, really driving the key message of trade and jobs and immigration and what have you. And so there had been sort of, plus there had been some of the FBI stuff back and forth.
The Comey letter, we'll get to that. And there was no off-script stuff from Trump.
Yeah, no off-script stuff. And so I thought that those few weeks of just that run of just solid campaigning, I thought that definitely saved the House and the Senate.
Right.
I did not have, just based on the polls, I had seen some where he's a little up nationally, some where he's a little down nationally. I've been looking at states, and from what from the folks I've talked with within the campaign and all, they were seeing possibility, but no one was saying I'm going to Vegas and betting. I mean, and so it was. And we had talked about this earlier.
You were up there in New York.
I was in New York on election night. And I think also what made this such an emotional ride is that we didn't go into Election Day with the national media narrative being, well, it could go either way. The national media narrative was, she's won.
Right.
And so a lot of the Clinton supporters, whether they believed it inside the campaign or not, which I think they did, that she had won, they were all really high in terms of expectations. And so they didn't go into Election Day thinking this is a close one. They went in thinking this is a done deal. Yeah. And so they had a lot further to fall psychologically. Right. Yeah. And so it made the roller coaster ride, instead of sort of a gradual landing from it's an even race, it was one of these where these people who are way up here came crashing down,
and
the other people just
very thrilling.
I mean, it was thrilling.
So I've heard this described. It wasn't just an election about change; it was an election about disruptive change, and that's really kind of what the Trump brand kind of is a disruptive change. I want to read this quote from you. Jonathan Martin, friend of mine, New York Times, wrote a really interesting piece about maybe Trump was a third-party candidate after all. Listen to what he says here. Mr. Trump ostensibly ran as a Republican, but he was effectively a third-party candidate who happened to campaign under the banner of one of the two major parties, casting himself as an outsider. He not only savaged leaders in both parties, but he made a mockery of nearly all the pieties of the American political system. Is there a little bit of truth in this?
I think there is truth to that. But I've been thinking about, and no one perspective totally defines this.
Right.
You have to sort of pull from different disciplines and different narratives to get a complete picture, because it's so complicated and so different from a lot of the things we've seen. It's exciting, but let me tell you what I think was a big part of it. When we saw the Republicans come home, meaning a lot of the Republicans, whether it be because of Republican leaders or they had other favorites or whatever, when they weren't at 90, 95%.
The Comey letter moved them,
do
you think?
The Comey letter did, but I also think the decision point where people are forced to make a binary choice. I think they said, hey, I'm Republican, I'm voting for Donald Trump. and you saw them come home, and that was awesome. But let me tell you a perspective I have on this as somebody who ran in 2010. I started thinking about it. So what happened in 2010? We had really, really massive change at the ballot box. We had the second largest freshman class in history in the U.S. House of Representatives. So that was 2010. In 2012, we fought really hard to get the Senate. We had some candidates that didn't work out, didn't happen, but the push was there. We gained more here. In any event, in 2014, we got the Senate. So for me, this is really in some ways completing the picture, right? The House, the Senate, and now the White House, and now they're together.
We're going to talk about some things at the state level that kind of track that a little bit here. Yeah. He's Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we're back with more right after this. Back with Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin. All right, let's shift from national politics to state politics here. I have been predicting for what was going to be a wave election for Republicans in Arkansas. There just weren't going to be as many boats in the ocean, so it wasn't going to be as visible. But the end result, 73, now 74 in the House, 26 in the Senate in terms of Republicans. Those are super majorities at this point in time. What are going to be the challenges for the Republican Party to govern with super majorities?
Well, with the growing size of the majority, you have growing diversity within the party. And party discipline and making sure that you can get enough votes for a particular policy is always something that you have to struggle with, whether it's a small majority or a larger majority. As it gets larger, it can be more difficult. Also, I think we're in a transition. We have some people with an R by their name that have believe in the policies of the Republican Party, and some are conservative, some more than others. But we do have some, I think it's fair to say, who, if Democrats were in charge, they would have run as Democrats. And I've had
conservative Democrats.
Well, or moderate.
Right.
You know, they might call themselves a conservative Democrat, may make it more of a moderate Republican.
Democrats had that back when the Democrats
Yeah, they did. Well, the truth is, as we know, there were a lot of different factions within the old Democrat Party. And I've even had conversations with people saying, you know, you ought to run as a Republican because you feel this way and that way. And they end up running as a Democrat and lose. And that happened this time with one in particular. And so there's some diversity there. And when you have that size of the majority, everybody's not going to be on the same page. So that's always a challenge. And that's where gubernatorial leadership, in terms of laying out his vision, is so important.
Let me interrupt you here. We're on a time deadline here. But how much is the medical marijuana passed? Another big issue that passed here. I know there's a lot of opposition to it. You were against it there. How much is that going to distract in this legislative session from tax cuts, from changes to DHS, to some of the Arkansas Works reform, higher education reform? I mean, you guys already had a really big agenda. How dominant might this medical marijuana implementation be?
Well, I'm sure
should there be a special session to deal with it? Well,
first of all, I think it's fair to point out that it's still a felony under federal law. It is still highly regulated substance under federal law. And so there's a real balancing act for policymakers dealing with this marijuana issue, because you do have the will of the voters, but you don't want to be seen as committing a felony under federal law.
Should there be a special session to deal with this? Will it be too much of a distraction?
I don't think it'll be. I don't think it needs a special session for it. And I think the governor, and I have not discussed this specifically with the governor, but I think if the governor lays out a plan on that, which I'm sure he has that. I haven't discussed it with him, but if he does, I think that can be channeled. Yeah. So I don't think that's a particular issue. I will say that the more time that is taken up on big policy pursuits of the governor, the longer that takes, the less time there is at the end, when that's over, for folks to, pursue their favorites or whatever. So
right,
we saw that in the last session.
Yeah, I'm going to end it there on air. Stick around. We'll do a web extra, and we'll talk about some other things, particularly your Twitter activity and the House. I want to talk to you about that.
What's this thing called Twitter?
Lieutenant Governor
The
Tim
Twitter.
Griffin, thank you. Welcome back to our Web Extra. A little bit more with Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin. You always have a lot to say, so we have to build extra time.
You've got to be more disciplined. Keeping me tight.
That's right.
Keeping me tight.
Let's talk about a little parliamentary move went down this week. It wasn't on your end of the building down in the Senate where you preside, but it was down in the House. The Democrats, even though they only have 26, actually wound up stacking the House Revenue and Tax Committee with 11 out of the 20 members on there, which gives them the majority on that. You tweeted your dissatisfaction with that it should be, in the wake of GOP victory, the Democrats should have not have any control of any committees. Are you going to push for some changes on that? What do you think is going to happen internally up there as a result of this?
Let me be real clear. I understand why they did it. They're using the rules that have been around since Athens was the center of the civilized world, right? And they are taking advantage of the rules that are there.
It's pretty good gamesmanship, though, isn't it?
Yeah. My beef is this. We should not be pursuing policies and rules and laws based on how things have always been. We should not be pursuing them the way we do them now. We should have one question. That is, what should we be doing? I don't care if it's been done for 500 years. The leadership ought to adopt policy that simply has, like as reflected in the Republican Party platform in this state, and is done in a lot of places all over the country, including the U.S. Congress, you ought to take the percentage that you win. Let's say you have 75% of the State House. The committee makeup ought to be 75%. You're expressing the will of the voters through the committee structure to give power, not just a voice, but to give complete chairmanship or power or whatever, a majority on a committee like that is basically this, saying, hey voters, thank you for giving a majority to us. We appreciate it very much, but we know better. We're going to give it to the Democrats and let them pursue the policies, even though you voted for our policies. And I tell my Republican friends, if you think when you don't get something done that you can use the excuse, well, we didn't control that committee, it ain't going to work. Because voters are going to say, oh, why don't you control that committee? Oh, is it because you gave the power away? So here's what I would propose. And I'm not in the House, but you know what I am? I'm a taxpayer and I'm a citizen and I've been involved for a long time and I have an opinion just like anybody else. So the idea that, well, you're not in the House or you're not a legislator.
What's your proposal?
My proposal is this. Thanks. My proposal is simply you take the percentage that you control in the body, the House or the Senate, and those percentages are reflected in the committees. So if you have 75% of the House, you have 75% of the seats on the committee, the other side gets 25%. The chairman is always the majority party, and you have a ranking minority member. Now, the Republicans can pick internally who they want to fill those seats. They can use a steering committee. They can have the speaker pick them, whatever. The Democrats can do the same.
Still put a Republican chairman in charge of that committee because there's 9 Republicans on there, and the House Speaker gets to do that.
The problem is the only defense.
It's easy for me to ask you and for you to agree that when Democrats were in charge, you would have been okay with that, and if Democrats are in power again, you would be okay with your proposal as well, because it's already in the past, and it's not likely to happen anytime soon.
No, well, here's what I'm saying. I am simply saying, I understand that I'm not blaming them for taking advantage of the rules. I'm blaming us for not having the foresight to fix this. I'm going to say this. I got elected in 2014. One of the first meetings I had with some other people that got elected in 2014. I said, I want to put something on your radar that is problematic. I said, the way we choose committee structure.
Seniority
Without regard to party.
By congressional district.
Right,
correct.
and all that stuff. That is problematic. and it's going to cause a problem down the road. And you know what? It did. It did on tort reform. It did on education reform. It did on voter ID. And those are just ones we know about. How many bills were never introduced in those committees because people knew it wasn't going to get past it? I'm not blaming folks for doing that. And the reason the Democrats had it this way is because it used to be a one-party state. There was no reason to worry about party. And a lot of the more moderate Democrats teamed up with Republicans against the more liberal Democrats. So there was all kind of stuff in the past. The past is past. What I'm about is the future. And what is right is to say, what should it look like? This is one man's opinion, but from what I hear the voters, and I just got off the phone with Tom Cotton, who's just a friend, we were talking. He agrees with me 110%. And a lot of
state legislators would love for a federal legislator to come meddle in their business.
No, it's not about meddling. He's a citizen too.
Yep.
We're all citizens, and we want what's best for the state. We shouldn't be, oh, you're not in this club, or you're not in that club.
You're going to push for something happening before the session starts to change this?
You know, I don't have a lot of levers to pull. You let me on this show, so I'm using this.
All right.
I'm communicating. It's just my view. They can agree or not agree, but I think this system will be changed. It may not be changed today. It may not be changed tomorrow. But reform is coming to this state. And the excuse of we've always done it this way, that is the laziest excuse, the laziest intellectual argument that can be made. Reform is coming, and it's going to come one way or the other if we're going to compete, and we're going to be able to grow jobs and reduce taxes and have opportunity for my 6-year-old, my 9-year-old, your kids. And so this is just a symptom of a broader problem.
All right, I have a lazy excuse of having to wrap us up here. So
I got to go home too. I got to go see my kids.
Griffin. All right, thank you so much. Thank you for watching our Web Extra. You can keep up with us each and every day at talkbusiness.net for the latest in business and politics. Thanks for watching.